Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Stratosphere Lounge, the Stratosphere Cave. That should have solved that problem. How y'all doing today? It's, golly, it's getting late in the year. It's the 27th of December. This is Stratosphere Lounge number 23. A little different tonight. Usually, this is, as I've said repeatedly, it's almost a point of pride for me, the worst produced show on the internet, because pretty much I just managed to just pull into the bat cave with the tires screeching and run upstairs and throw up the lights and grab the jacket and pull the comments that I wanted to pull and print them out and then take a look at them. But I didn't have time to do that today either. So it was a good thing that we decided to do kind of a light topic tonight, because this time we're just going to look at the questions in real time, which will be hilarious. How y'all doing? It's been an interesting year, hasn't it? And this is the last one of this year. And 2013 is going to be a busy, busy, busy year for us. I know for a lot of you, before we get to the questions, you watched all of the destruction that Barack Obama's done in the first term, and many of us realize it's not even the destruction he's doing really so much as it's just the fact that the population is voting for him and allowing all this stuff. Harry Reid's Senate hasn't passed a budget in over 3 years. It's against the law, basically. Nobody cares. Fast and Furious doesn't get investigated. Benghazi doesn't get investigated. All of these big brains in the press who are so concerned about civil liberties and stuff, because they're not doing their job, if they're not careful, they're going to get the kind of camps and mass murder that they always get when these socialists come into power and there's no press corps to do their jobs. And it can be pretty rough for a bunch of us out there. So 2012 has been a brutal year. I know a lot of people out there thought that this was an aberration, that all of this Obama stuff was an aberration caused by the 2008 financial meltdown and the inevitability of the first historic black president and all that other stuff. And I think the 2012 election really shocked a lot of people on our team into thinking, no, this is an indication that things are really, really going badly. And then, we get out there after the election, and we're trying to find the means to get some of these pieces on the board, get in the game, and still I don't think people fully realize the fundamental issue that we're facing today. And I'll just start with this, then we'll lighten it up. Just kind of had to get this off my chest today. I've talked to a few people, conservative businessmen and some financial people, trying to raise some money to get in the game. And I said, imagine that we're Coca-Cola and that our vision of America is Coca-Cola. And let's imagine that the vision of an anti-American progressive America is Pepsi-Cola. No offense to you Pepsi drinkers out there. I'm just picking two brands. Now, in the 30s and 40s and 20s, up and through the 50s, really, even into the 60s, everybody drank Coca-Cola. And hardly anybody drank Pepsi. And nobody was really too worried on the Coca-Cola brand, because Coca-Cola was the most famous brand in the world. And this is kind of where we are. When people think about a pro-American message not being advertised, it's not true. Every movie that was ever made between the invention of the movies and right up and through the start of the anti-hero movies in the mid to late 60s was an advertisement for America. And obvious movies like It's a Wonderful Life or Meet John Doe or Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, 3 Capra films in a row, not by coincidence. John Wayne films, all of this stuff took a pretty positive view of American culture and American history. Lionel Chetwynd, who does a show called Pollywood at PJTV. It's been a pleasure to get to know him. I got a loose hair floating around here somewhere. You are out of there, because I can afford it. Then said that basically the vision of America prior to the rise of the anti-hero and the progressives getting a hold of Hollywood the same time they got a hold of academia and the news media, that the previous view of America, the America that we advertised as the Coke brand, as the pro-American brand, was basically this: that America was a fundamentally good place and that it was filled with fundamentally good people. That didn't mean you couldn't have drama. It meant that the drama almost always followed the same pattern, and you can chart this pretty closely in a film that we all know, and that's It's a Wonderful Life. In It's a Wonderful Life, is it Bedford Falls, the town, I think, is a lovely place. It's actually Eden. It's a form of paradise. It's a little town where everybody knows each other and everything's works and there's no crime. And the guy goes out with his sweetheart and they sit in the drugstore and have sodas and everybody's good and decent and kind. And then what happens in that Coke version of America is that something happens, and something happens. The drama comes from when America's knocked off its perch as a good place, and it always seems to be for the same reason. A good man stops being good, and because of his goodness, his individual goodness, his personal responsibility, his individual goodness is removed from the world becomes a bad place. It becomes Potterville. When George Bailey decides he doesn't want to be George Bailey anymore because it's too boring and too banal, the essential goodness of George Bailey, which reproduced fractally out throughout the population, is what made America a good place. When George Bailey makes the decision not to be George Bailey, he's going to wallow in self-pity and he's going to kill himself, and who would miss him? Well, obviously we find out who would miss him and what would happen to the town if the goodness of the American, usually the American man, if the goodness of the American dad basically is removed from society, turns to Potterville. But America's not Potterville. America's natural state is not Potterville. America's natural state is Bedford Falls. And it's only when good people abdicate their responsibility that America becomes Potterville. And the second that they get it back, the second that they accept responsibility and get back into the fight, so to speak, and the fight is just getting up and going to work every day, then you get Eden again. You get America back. And this was Lionel Chetwynd's great observation. I thought it was so incredibly true that the movies sold America because it was a form of advertising. It was our pop culture, it was our mythology. Sold America as a place that was fundamentally good and only went off the rails when good people stopped being good. And you can follow this example as long as you care to follow it. You can follow it through another favorite movie of mine, High Noon, where basically one good American man has to step up and be a good American man, and if he does, then the people will support him. But if he doesn't, then they won't. It's a profoundly interesting analysis of why America was so successful and why we have such love for our country, because we advertise the pro-American Coca-Cola brand. Well, what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to convince the people who are Coca-Cola drinkers that we have for the last 30, 40 years, basically stopped advertising for Coca-Cola, and Pepsi has been pouring, and this is not an exaggeration, Soros himself puts $1 billion or $2 into this a year. When you throw in the amount of money that's spent on all of these anti-American movies and TV shows, I bet you it's $20 to $50 billion a year in advertising for Pepsi for the last 30 or 40 years, and not a penny advertising for Coke. Every now and then you'll find some fluke, some weird sort of oddball, somebody by accident almost got into the culture war with the Coke brand. And we sit here and wonder why we lose elections, and we wonder why we're getting our butts handed to us. And when you go and try to convince people that we need to advertise the Coca-Cola brand, they look at you in amazement. Even after the 2012 election, they look at you in utter amazement. And I don't know what to do about this. I know that that our message is so much stronger than their message, that if we got serious about it, and I mean serious is like $100 million a year, we could make a real dent on this culture, probably enough of a dent so that we didn't lose elections anymore. And if we spend anything like what they spend $20 billion a year. For $1 billion or $2 or $3 billion a year, we could own NBC. We could certainly own Thursday Night on NBC. We could buy the New York Times. We could buy Cosmopolitan, and we would never lose again, ever. But you cannot sit around and watch your competitors spend $2 or $3 or $20 billion a year, primarily on the youth, by the way, which means that every single day that goes by, they get an increasing market share and we get a decreasing market share. And if this doesn't panic people now, then I don't know what to do about it. Yes, it's so fun to do the show because I get to see the live comments. I did read Glenn Reynolds' comment, Uppity the Fool 92. about owning women's magazines. It's much better investment. We lost the election because of single women who voted for the daddy and the husband, the distant husband. They may not like to hear it, but that's what they want. They want the support and they want to be taken care of by the government. So why don't we buy Cosmopolitan or Elle or any of these Glamour, any of these magazines? Why don't we buy them and very slowly put out conservative? When I say conservative content, it can't be like here are the advantages of small government in between ads for Chanel No. 5. It just has to be editorial. It has to be subtle, the way they're doing it now. And so if we can't get conservative money into the fight now, then I don't think there's ever going to. I don't know what to say now. If two elections of Barack Obama is not going to do it for you, then I don't know what to say. I'm actually looking. I'm going to be doing a lot of speaking during this coming year, and what I'd really like to do is I'd like to be going out and rather than speaking to millions of people a year, I'd like to speak to 20. I'd like to convince 20 Americans that this is important, because if I could convince the right 20 Americans, we wouldn't lose again. And it's so freaking frustrating to sit here with these answers and try to get the resources to put them into place. Anyway, we're going to be doing the virtual presidency in 2013, one way or another. It's going to happen. And based on the reaction I've gotten from the Horowitz speech, which was the virtual presidency in a very embryonic form, then we'll see if that'll attract enough attention and enough credibility to get some money on the table. But honestly, it's crazy. Anyway, 2013, we're going to get out there and we're going to just start again and start swinging. So that's the problem. The problem really comes down to money. It really does come down to money. It really honestly does. It comes down to who's putting money on the table and who's getting product out the door, and the people who are doing the advertising are winning the fight. And when we talk about spending money, we spend money on the Heritage Foundation and the RNC, and these are great organizations. But I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars did we spend on this election that we lost, when if we had some product out there that showed businessmen as heroes and guys with $300 or $250 million as heroes, maybe we wouldn't have lost that election. Maybe we wouldn't. Anyway, let's go to the question section on Facebook. And I haven't read these. Like I said, just flew in the door tonight. So we'll just take a quick look at them. And I'm just going to skip the ones that I feel like I've already talked about or that just aren't really in the mood for. I just want to do something a little lighter tonight. So here we go. You wouldn't know it off of that intro, would you? Let's see. Jared Bryant wants to know, quick clarification. In the last TSL, you said that you had not seen The Hobbit, and later, if I heard you correctly, you said that you had. Might be a picayune thing, but the contradiction bothers me greatly. Thanks. I did see The Hobbit. I saw the second half of The Hobbit. I was very badly delayed, and I was about an hour and 15 minutes late to see it the first time I saw it, right around Christmas, a little before Christmas. And I knew that wasn't going to be a problem because I knew the book pretty well, and I thought that the first half of The Hobbit was going to be pretty slow. Obviously, I'm not the first person to point this out. The Lord of the Rings is an incredibly dense, unbelievably dense, epic story from which they peeled 3 movies, and I thought magnificently. I thought of all the things that there was to love about Lord of the Rings film adaptation is just how absolutely adroitly and lovingly, really, that Peter Jackson pulled the story, you could say 12, it's really 15, 16 hours of movie when you throw in all the special editions, which I saw every one of, I watch every year. So he managed to pull the exact right 16 hours out of what would have been a 400-hour movie. So that was great. Now, The Hobbit obviously is a smaller book, and rather than doing one small movie, we're going to do 3 movies. I could have bought 2. I don't know if I bought 3. But anyway, put all that aside. I liked the movie okay, and I thought it was fun. It was good to be back in the universe. I saw it traditionally in 24-frame 2D. I went back and saw it 2-3 nights ago in 3D at the high frame rate, which I was convinced was going to be awful. I've heard nothing but bad things about it, but I have to tell you that 3D high frame rate version was simply gorgeous. Everybody's been talking it down. Everybody says it looks like crap. I thought it was spectacular. And I have an eye about these things. I think The Hobbit The Hobbit does things that you never saw in Lord of the Rings, and they greatly diminish the story. There's too much CGI. There's too much, and there's too much unbelievable stuff, visual effects. So it's a problem with CGI, because once you get CGI, then you start thinking about, gee, how we could do this in computer graphics. And then you start putting together scenes that could never exist in the real world, but they're more spectacular than the real world, so you go ahead and do them. And because they're not in the real world, the movie ends up being less interesting. A great example in The Hobbit, it's not a real spoiler, certainly not a plot spoiler. I believe it's in the trailer, as a matter of fact. Towards the end, they fight the Goblin King, who was a bizarre choice, actually. But in the movie, the 12 dwarfs plus Gandalf plus Bilbo are on a bridge. The bridge collapses. They ride this, or some sort of wooden, ad hoc kind of wooden structure. The wooden structure goes down a hill at about 80 degrees and just goes down the hill, and they're moving at 150 miles an hour or something like this on this ad hoc wooden structure with all 12 or 14 of them hanging on for dear life. And they crash at the bottom, and it's boink, my neck, And then a 2,000-pound goblin falls on them. Oh, gosh, that hurt. And it's symptomatic of the fact that would have killed those dwarves. Now, I know that sounds like an odd thing to say when you're talking about dwarves and goblins, but see, that's a thing that never happened in The Lord of the Rings, and that's why The Lord of the Rings was so magnificent. There was never a moment where the laws of physics or believability were denied. You set up this world, you walked into the world, you had the willing suspension of disbelief. You never had anything that made you, want to doubt that. Getting picked up by a giant eagle is believable in a world of giant eagles. But sliding down side of a mountain into a cave at 100 miles an hour on a broken down piece of wood, smashing into the bottom, and then having 1,000 pounds of flesh fall on you and have that be just kind of like a oof, that's not believable. Another great example in Lord of the Ring, in The Hobbit, is when they're fighting the wolves and they're climbing the trees, and the trees start toppling over, and all the dwarves go from one tree to the next to the next. That's all done by CG. I don't know how they would have done that in the real world. And so, since they couldn't have done it in the real world, at least not at incredible expense, it looked fake to me. Got a little problem with the color issues here. Let me see if this solves the... What do you think of that? What do you think of that? It's called white balancing. And in the world of professional cameras, it's not as yellow. It'll probably fade back. In a world of professional cameras, you just set them and lock them. But these advanced cameras that we have on the automatic stuff built into the Apple is constantly updating things and recolor balancing, and I get jaundice. Anyway, that's my view of The Hobbit. I like I was surprised at how much I like the high frame rate and the 3D. 3D glasses are still far too heavy, and when they're sitting on regular glasses, it really hurts after 3.5 hours. What does Bill Whittle listen to relax? That was from Sleepy Joe Kielbasa. Well, Sleepy Joe, Bill Whittle doesn't relax that much. I suppose if I'm going to have somebody over to the apartment, I might put some jazz on the cable box and blow it through the TV. I live in mortal terror of my iPod being found by the enemy, because I've got a real sort of eclectic taste in music. I like very high. I generally like. So I guess I'm getting around a question in kind of a roundabout way. I don't generally like relaxing music. Pretty much everything I've got on there is very high beat count stuff. I have a lot of stuff from the 80s. A lot of it was a real formative time for me. I worked in a nightclub in Miami between 80 and about 87, 88, and so I listened to all the kind of dance stuff. And I don't much like the dance. I got dance techno stuff. I got a couple of tunes on there for nostalgia's sake only, like Expose or Information Society, which I just have on there because it takes me back. I have a lot of high beat count 80s stuff, lots and lots and lots. So a lot of Adamant and a lot of David Bowie and a couple Pretenders tunes, but Talking Heads. So I like that kind of stuff. And then I have a lot of classical music on there, and I have I've gotten into, it helps me write action scenes is things like, you know, a little bit of techno stuff from soundtrack to Mortal Kombat, or from a couple of tracks, just a couple from The Matrix and so on. So mostly it's high energy stuff. I don't have a lot of like really soothing stuff. I like a little bit of pop. I got a couple tunes on there I'm occasionally just like to hear. Now some of them I'm not ashamed of. Some of the pop tunes I have on there I'm actually not ashamed. I'm not ashamed to have the Partridge Family, I Think I Love You, on there. I'm not ashamed to have, especially not ashamed to have the Monkees' Daydream Believer. That's one of my favorite songs ever. Just adore that song. But you know, I got a couple of tunes. I was actually sitting down relaxing at a spa, trying to get some work done on my neck. I have a bad disc, caused me some trouble, and they were playing 70s, like mellow 70s collection, and it was all of those tunes back to Baby Come Back and I'm Not in Love, and I didn't know there were that many slow songs, but man, it took me right back to my senior year in high school, where I realized we were just somnambulistic. It's unbelievable how slow and mellow pop music was back then. Really, I like Fleetwood Mac. When Fleetwood Mac hit the scene, put a little energy into things. When I started, I mean, I didn't pay any attention to music even until I started getting into high school. And you know, we were listening. I mean, like pop, like number one songs were like was it Debbie Boone? God, one of these love ballads that were just awful, and Silver Convention, Fly Robin Fly, and I Shot the Sheriff, and Rock the Boat, and Billy Don't Be a Hero, and Seasons in the Sun. My God, it's a miracle we didn't just shoot ourselves, all of us, the entire generation. It's a miracle we just didn't just blow our brains out. Seasons in the Sun. Billy, Don't Be a Hero. The only one of those awful, awful, awful 70s songs that I actually loved was The Night Chicago Died. I know the words to that tune. That was really kind of fun. But, you know, Fleetwood Mac got interesting, and I like a lot of Fleetwood Mac tunes, and I love the Fleetwood Mac album. I love Rumors. We listen to that on trips up to Disney World all the time. And then out of nowhere comes, you know, Gary Newman and Cars and Talking Heads and Remain in Light. I've got pretty much everything on that album is on my iPod, and just suddenly things just changed. And I remember the first time I saw MTV, I saw it go on the air, and I remember seeing the first video they played was "Video Killed the Radio Star." Just a music video blew me away, and then they did "Hungry Like the Wolf" and "Don't You Want Me." This is like first couple of months of MTV. And I actually have to tell you, I'm not really proud of this, but I spent a summer watching a house with a friend of mine. We didn't leave the house. We just watched MTV for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours, and ate cheese-filled hot dogs. The most disgusting summer I ever had in my life. No money and nothing to do, and just sitting there, and watched a hell of a lot of MTV, and played a little helicopter rescue game on the Apple IIe Chopper. What was it called? A little helicopter rescue game where it was on the Apple IIe. It was all green and black, and you flew this helicopter forward, and you shot guys on the ground, and then you landed and picked up guys, and you flew away, and you had to dodge fighter jets. It was like a side scroller. Anyway, that's my basic of music, but I'm not a music guy, I'm sorry to say. I have a very broad sense of music. I owe that to Jack Horkheimer and the Miami Planetarium. Got some Steely Dan on there and that kind of classic stuff. I got some. I like Steely Dan quite a lot. I like Donald Fagen quite a lot. I like Avalon, Roxy Music, Brian Ferry. If I'm going to go into the relaxation mode, that's kind of where I want to go. But yeah, Jack Horkheimer at the Miami Planetarium. When I was 12 or 13, I started at 13, so 13 on. When I was 13, I'd listen to. He did a show called Child of the Universe, and we'd listen to the music of Kurt Weill and Lotte Lenya, talking about the music of pre-Nazi Germany and the period between the wars, and Berlin cabaret music. And I'd listen to, he did a show called Buck Rogers Right On, and so that got me a chance to listen to all the great radio classics. So I'd listen to Alan's Alley when I was 13 or 14, and listen to, who else did we have? Just all the radio classics and Buck Rogers and all that stuff. I was very lucky. A lot of classical music, a lot of very eclectic stuff. We'd listen to jazz, and we'd listen to Is That All There Is, and I was very fortunate in that regard. First album I ever bought was I was 13, Choplifter. Thank you very much, Dave Olson. I was 13, I think, for Christmas or my birthday. I was working in the Miami Planetarium. My friends were all 10 years older than me. They were electrical engineers, and so for my birthday or Christmas, I guess it was my birthday, they bought me a Radio Shack amplifier. It was a Pro 4 AA. Were those headphones or AA 14? These, I actually remember the model number. And I built this little amplifier, and I got a turntable. And the first album I bought was Brandenburg Concertos by Johann Sebastian Bach. Odd choice for a 13-year-old in 1973. But, yeah, who knows? Moving on. Let's see here. Is an oscillation overthruster going to be on the set of your sci-fi movie? Charles Tomes wants to know that. You know, Charles, that had never occurred to me, but it's such a magnificently awesome idea. I love how I love putting little Easter eggs in things. And the oscillation overthruster, for those of you poor benighted people out there may be 2 or 3 of you who are so blighted and deprived, and that you've never seen Buckaroo Banzai and his adventures across the 8th dimension. The oscillation overthruster is the device invented by Emilio Lizardo and Buckaroo's dad, whose first name escapes me, Dr. Banzai, that allowed them to penetrate solid matter and travel through the 8th dimension. And in the front of Buckaroo's Ford truck, I guess it was a Ford, that he modified to be able to drive through solid rock, is a little device that he clips into the wall called the oscillation overthruster. And it's the neatest little thing in the world. It makes this fantastic little boop, boop, these little beepy kind of almost like R2-D2 sounds. And yeah, the oscillation overthruster is an awesome little prop, by the way. Great little prop. Neat little prop. And most of you who've seen the movie caught this. But when they fire up the oscillation overthruster, when he clicks it in, it says signed, and a little computer voice, and it's S-I-N-E-D as in like sine wave. It's signed. And then when they're getting ready to run the thing, when they actually turn it on, the laser beams come out. It goes sealed. And then when they actually go through the mountain, it says delivered. So it's signed, sealed, delivered. So there's a little Easter egg inside the Easter egg. And yeah, Buckaroo Banzai is one of my 3 favorite movies ever. And I miss, I saw a little reference to Andrew Breitbart there a minute ago. I'll still do this someday. I live a quarter mile, half a mile, from the giant flood control district basin structures that make up the end of Buckaroo Banzai. Buckaroo Banzai has the best credit sequence ever filmed, ever. It is the best credit sequence I've ever seen, and I've gone back to see that movie in theaters 3 or 4 times just to see the end credits. It's available on YouTube. Look for Buckaroo Banzai high quality end credits. It's it's just absolutely freaking terrific. And for the last, 15 or 20 years, I've wanted to do something out there. When I say wanted to do something, I wanted to recreate the end sequence. And I'm going to, by God, mark my words. And what I wanted to do, and I'll still do it, it just won't be quite the same. I want to recreate the ending of the Buckaroo Banzai credits frame for frame. And I'm going to be Buckaroo, and I'm going to throw the rope down. I'm going to rappel, not really rappel, just kind of let myself down into the basin, look around, start walking, exact same music, and then I want to have all the people in the conservative blogosphere kind of join up the way they do, because the end credits of the movie are basically this incredibly neat high-tech march called, I think it's called the Banzai March, Buckaroo Banzai March, and he's just and these guys are fashion plates. It was the fashion plates for whatever year it was, 85, I think. But even then, even today, that fashion holds up because it was so bleeding edge, that fashion. And they were just walking, and it was one of those great moments. Where they're going to do Amendment X says they were going to have a sequel. They were going to have a sequel. It was Buckaroo Banzai versus the World Crime League, and I was waiting for that movie. I almost didn't want to leave the theater. I'll just stay here until they shoot the next one, and I can't wait. But there's a lot to be said about that end sequence. There's a lot to be said about Buckaroo Banzai. So again, I haven't seen these questions, so I'll talk about Buckaroo for a minute. What I like most about Buckaroo Banzai and this is what we were talking about a minute ago when we started this. I'm getting a little jaundice again. Magic. Is this. Buckaroo Banzai was a scientist, a brain surgeon, and leader of a rock and roll band simultaneously. And there's a scene there are so many absolutely excellent scenes in that movie, but one of my favorites is when first thing you see with Buckaroo is he's doing brain surgery in the morning, and he's working with Jeff Goldblum, who's also a brain surgeon. And there's a problem, and Goldblum's talking about just standard deviation, and this doesn't know what this is nerve or that nerve, and he's about to, do something, and Buckaroo says, "No, don't touch that. You don't know what it might be connected to." And so after he does the brain surgery, he gets in a helicopter, goes out to like Bonneville Salt Flats or Mojave Desert or something like, I guess it's Bonneville, and lands, gets in his rocket-powered truck, fires up the oscillation overthruster, drives through a mountain, not a tunnel in a mountain, drives through the actual stone of the mountain. And that's a busy day, and as soon as he's done with that, he and the rest of his scientists go out and they start doing some work in a Jersey nightclub. They're the Buckaroo Banzai and the Hong Kong Cavaliers, and they play a bunch of rock and roll sets. And that appealed to me so much from the beginning. I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to set up something like the Buckaroo Banzai, like the Banzai Institute in real life, and the Free Frontier is going to be something a little like that. But here's the power. See, we're talking about advertising just by happenstance at the beginning of this. Talking about advertising ideas and conservative ideas. There's a scene in this movie where you've got these guys who are nuclear physicists, brain surgeons, and rock and rollers. The third one's the most important. And they play in this gig, and they're getting the music amped up, and everybody's, and Buckaroo is, plays guitar and trumpet and all of this. And just as he's about to start singing, this girl in the audience, turns out to be his love interest, Penny Pretty, is going to kill herself with a pistol. And she has her arm jarred at the last second by a passing waitress, and she misses, and the gun goes off. And instantly, every single person on that rock and roll band instantly drops their weapons, drops their instruments, and pulls out more guns than I've ever seen in my life. Every single one of these guys is armed to the teeth. And they just form this defensive perimeter around the stage because somebody's fired a shot in the audience. And do you not see the power of this? The power that this has culturally? How you can have all of the NRA statements in the world and all of the arguments and all of the firewalls. This is the point I led with this evening. Honestly, folks, you have all the firewalls and policy positions and rationality and argument and all of this stuff whatsoever. But when you see guys who are bleeding edge fashionistas, who are handsome, brilliant, funny, brave, courageous guys who rescue the girl, and the second there's a threat on their life, they come out fully armed, that is worth all of it, and 100 times all of it. And if everybody had seen that movie and movies like that, we wouldn't be having this discussion. It's just astonishing. I don't know why nobody gets this. I really don't. And so you go out and try and get some of this product out there to do this kind of thing, and people look at you like you're from Mars. So Buckaroo Banzai and the Oscillation Overthruster. Oscillation Overthruster will make an appearance in my movie. And in movie 3, if I ever get there, or season 3, there will be an appearance of something also that is on YouTube that you really need to see. That was shown to me only a few years ago. But it's as good as the end credits. Excuse me, on Buckaroo Banzai. And you must go see the end credits on Buckaroo Banzai. It's called, it's a presentation done by a guy who actually, I think, worked for one of the aerospace primes. And you need to go to YouTube and you need to find a guy talking about the turbo encapsulator. It is nothing but 3.5 minutes of utter jargon that makes no sense whatsoever, but it is an example of the beautiful, absolutely beautiful work you can do with satire, and shows exactly how people can talk and talk and talk and not say anything. Jargon, man. The turbo encapsulator. And Dave Olson, as usual, has picked up on the fact that I said season 2, season 3 when I'm talking about Aurora. Because I've been looking at this as a movie with a large number, infinite number of sequels. And it certainly seemed to be the way to go. But now, astonishingly how dense I can be, but very, very late in the game, I realized, no, the thing to do is to get the money together and do it as a series on either AMC or, it'd be nice, Sci-Fi. Because when you talk, the whole purpose of this is not to make the money back. I think you could make the money back, but put that aside for a minute. What we're really talking about is social penetration, right? Is getting the message out there. And I have recently, I've had Apple TV for a while, and I recently did something I hadn't done before, and that is I started looking at all of these miniseries only because they have so much traction. All people talk about, all they talk about are Game of Thrones, Walking Dead, to smaller degree, Boardwalk Empire, Battlestar Galactica for years was the only thing people talked about. Everybody was talking about them. I'm getting tired of doing this, so sorry. Come on. It must be the background colors are throwing me off here. That's a much better shade, but anyway. So, yes, Breaking Bad, another great example. Now, I don't want to step on anybody's toes here because I've seen some of these and not seen others. I've seen parts of some and not seen all of others, and I'm perfectly willing to admit that I'm, maybe wrong about this. But I'll tell you what my general impression is. The amount of buzz and the amount of conversation and the amount of attention, societal attention that these well-produced episodic shows get is amazing. It's amazing. And some of these shows are not very good. I sat down and watched Game of Thrones. I watched the first 3 or 4 episodes of Game of Thrones, and it is, in my opinion, utter dreck. Dreck. It's horribly produced. Horribly. And I'll just give you an example of how a person with an eye can look at this. I was watching Game of Thrones. I watched, like I said, the first 4 or 5 episodes. And I thought, they've got some budget here, not a big budget, certainly not Lord of the Rings, but they want to be Lord of the Rings. And so there's a scene where they go into the throne room. You finally see the throne room in like episode 3 or something like this. And Sean Bean goes into the throne room. And I look at these columns, and on the columns are engraved kind of ivy, but it's very heavy and very blocky and very badly done. And I've heard Homeland is great, by the way. I'll get started on that too, I guess. And they have armor, but the armor has just got etchings on it. And all of this stuff, the reason Lord of the Rings was so magnificent was really because of Richard Taylor. And he basically said, we're going to have different cultures, and the different cultures are going to have different mythologies, different art, different colors, and you'll be able to look instantly, and say, that's a dwarf, take the people out of it. That's dwarfish armor, that's elvish armor, that's the armor of Rohan, that's the armor of Gondor. Those are orcs, and it's visually interesting and really, really, really excellent. And then I'm watching Game of Thrones, which has a much smaller budget, and I understand they don't have the time and effort that they had with Lord of the Rings. I fully get that. But somebody carved something into that armor, and somebody put a motif on something, and they had, like a sunburst motif on the stained glass windows. And I watched 3 episodes, right? I didn't get paid big money to analyze this thing. But I'm watching this, and I'm thinking, okay, at the opening credits, every single actor has a little tile next to their name, and it's a tile of their clan. So Sean Bean is a little wolf because apparently the Winterfell people are the wolf clan kingdom, and the King's Landing people are stags. They're like buck deers, and then there's horse people and all this other stuff. So I thought, well, if we're in the kingdom if we're in King's Landing, why don't we have, rather than ivy climbing up the walls, why don't we have horn motifs climbing up the walls? And why don't we have the stag motif everywhere on the armor if we're going to be that why? It seems to me so fundamentally obvious. It seems to me that they've already done it and done it so well that I'm getting tired of getting yellow and blue here. I might have to go change those background colors in a second. I think red is throwing me off a little bit. Anyway, in fact, I'm sure that's it. If you'll excuse me 1 second, I'll see if I can solve this jaundice issue, because I think it's reading these red backgrounds. Hang on 1 second. That's far, far worse. One of these days, I'm telling you, one of these days I'm going to get this iced. Let's see if this helps. Oh, well. We're not going to worry about it. Anyway, as I was saying, and everything in Game of Thrones is trying to sound to me like Lord of the Rings, but they're not. You know, I honest to God, I can't tell you the names of any of these characters, because they kind of sound like, you know, wannabe Tolkien names, but they don't sound different. The clan names don't sound different. Anyway, I don't know. But Game of Thrones, just as an example, has gotten tremendous social penetration. Breaking Bad, oh my goodness, I got to stop for a second. M. Pelinitz has got the coolest little icon there. That is, I haven't seen that in a long time. I put up on my website about a year ago or two. When I was in college, I'm so sorry to interrupt the flow here, but in the comment stream, and this won't mean anything for you on YouTube, apologize for that, but there's a guy or a woman there, but basically, when I was at the University of Florida, there was a little decal. This was 1979-80. And it was the Florida Gator, and he had a top hat on, and he's got a little cane, and he's leaning forward at a very jaunty angle, and he's got his hat off, and it says, "A Florida man needs no introduction." And I just saw that in my comment stream, and it just meant the world to me. Anyway, you know, these episodes, these episodic shows get a tremendous amount of attention. Battlestar Galactica was really good in places, and really, really not good in places. And all it needed was somebody with some sense of understanding of, you know, actual military and I don't know. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is I think it makes much, much, much more sense, rather than doing one movie, which I overwrite anyway, which is a 2-hour movie. What you do is you do a 2-hour pilot, but you take the first movie and spread it out over 6 episodes. You do a 6-episode season, maybe a 10 or something. And then those characters are there. They're out there for 6 months. They're reruns for 6 months. People start following it. They start getting behind it. Everybody's talking about it at the water cooler. What's going to happen next week? And I think you could absolutely, absolutely do a much better job. I think there's a big, big story to be told in this kind of private space future. I mean, in movie 2, these guys go to war with China. That would be what would happen in season 2 and season 3 and season 4 and so on. And then if the thing gets any kind of traction, and it will because it's interesting, then if the fan base is there and people are screaming, you go raise some money, and you and then you go and do a couple feature films. It's so obvious to me. I don't know why I didn't see it earlier. But I've seen a bunch of these things, and just so you give you a quick little rundown, here's just my take on series individually. My favorite entertainment in the world is probably Lord of the Rings. My favorite movie is Aliens, but in terms of me just enjoying things, Lord of the Rings is first, and a close second is Deadwood. Very close. Deadwood to me was just fantastic. Now, of course, it's the most vulgar show on TV, and I know for a lot of people that's just a deal killer, and I'm not built that way. I tend to swear like a sailor when I'm off camera. But Deadwood was magnificent. And you know, I heard something. Al Swearingen is one of the greatest characters that's ever been created. Is one of the greatest written and greatest realized characters ever. Al Swearingen from Deadwood. He's magnificent. And it was only after watching him for 10 years that somebody said the perfect word for Al Swearingen. Swearingen is Shakespearean. He's a Shakespearean character. So Deadwood is fantastic. The Sopranos I didn't watch all of, but I watched about 3 or 4 seasons, and that was magnificent. And Tony Soprano is a Shakespearean character, larger than life, cultural phenomenon. And I kept, after I had this idea about doing this thing as a series, I went, what the heck is the matter with me? You know, I still have this 30, 40-year-old prejudice about the little screen. I'm watching this on home. I just bought a 60-inch LCD. I got it for about $1,000. I do a lot of work on TV, and I've been working hard and saving my money, so I bought a 60-inch TV. And it's like sitting in certainly as good as sitting in one of those cracker boxes multiplexes, and it's a great way to watch stuff. It really is. You really get lost in 60-inch HD. It's got the same resolution as you see on a movie. In fact, I think we might have talked about this last week. I have to turn down the frame rate on my TV because it's too realistic. I have to get rid of the 120 hertz thing. So I love Deadwood. I loved The Sopranos. I thought they were first rate. Rome was excellent. And then on a tier below that, I've seen a couple of episodes of Breaking Bad. It looks terrific. I watched all of Boardwalk Empire seasons 1 and season 2, but Boardwalk Empire had its moments, but time and time and time again, I would just say out loud, I don't believe it. I don't believe she'd said that. I don't believe she'd go back to him. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Although I will say this, Boardwalk Empire has the most amazing season 2 finale I've ever seen. I just loved it. I thought, man, that took nerve. Really nerve, guts. But generally, I had really mixed feelings about Boardwalk Empire, but frankly, didn't enjoy it nearly as much as I would like because it just didn't believe it. There was a lot of it, just didn't believe it. I haven't seen, again, I said little, I've seen a Breaking Bad look good. I watched a lot of Battlestar Galactica. I'm still watching Battlestar Galactica. I'm really over Starbuck. I'm over this entire attitude. I'm over this entire, screw you, sir, kind of, stogie smoking, hard drinking, pilot who's not only the best pilot in the fleet, but turns out she's also the best sniper in the fleet. So she's going to go on all the ground missions, and she's a Marine, and she's a pilot, and she's a hard drinking, hard fighting, hard this, hard that. I don't buy it. I don't believe it. And every time I see it, it takes me out of the game. Somebody mentioned Band of Brothers. Band of Brothers is as good as it gets. I completely agree there, Jay Blodgett. It's fantastic. But Band of Brothers was on HBO, ran once. I really think you have to have to get out in the pop culture. I think you want to be someplace that's not behind a firewall. HBO is never going to run this anyway. HBO is Mordor, right? HBO is the most awful liberal thing ever. I saw all of Downton Abbey. Season 1 was terrific. Season 2 was not terrific. Season 2 of Downton Abbey was just plain, parts of it were just laugh out loud, stupid, cheap. The word I use watching this, I watched this with a writer's eye and a director's eye. But the word that keeps coming back to me again and again and again and again and again is it's lazy. It's lazy. It's just lazy. I'll give you an example. There's a scene in Game of Thrones where this little kid, the little boy, is climbing up to the top of the wall so he can watch something. Now, put aside the fact that castles have high rooms with windows in them. If the kid wants to scale the wall and watch from the wall, that's fine. But when you watch this kid climbing the wall, you see the side of a castle, the side that they built out of plaster, and all of the stones are smooth, except there are a bunch of stones that are extending out like a climbing wall so that the people who built this castle 800 years ago say, maybe someday a 10-year-old boy's going to want to climb up to the top. We got to let these particular stones stand out a little bit so he's got some place to climb. This kind of thing takes me immediately out of the story. It's lazy. It's just so lazy. Why not have the kid be able to climb a very tough wall? Doesn't that make the kid more interesting? He's known as a climber. Doesn't it make it more perilous? Doesn't it raise the stakes? You have these, and it's nowhere else except right here. There's just 9 stones that extend out enough for a 10-year-old kid to be able to climb up the wall. It's lazy and stupid. Starbuck, being a insubordinate fist-fighting character is lazy. It's the only word for it. It's lazy. They think that this is what fighter pilots are. They think this is how they behave. They think it's interesting, but it's not. It would have been so much more interesting if she was a professional who was clamoring, who inside was burning underneath all of the conflict and the guilt and the shame and the brokenness. It's just lazy. And they always do it. They always take this easy way out. I had a friend who was an air traffic controller in the Air Force for many years. And he basically, I asked him when Top Gun came out, I said, what would have happened if a fighter pilot asked permission to buzz the tower, which doesn't happen, and was denied permission, did it anyway? What would actually happen? Because that happened in Top Gun. He said, oh, that'd be easy. He said when that guy taxied his F-14 up to wherever he was parking it, he would have been met by 2 Hummers full of MPs with M16s leveled at the cockpit. And as soon as that cockpit came up, they would have said, get on the ground! Get on the ground now! Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! And they would have taken him and they would have handcuffed him and thrown him in the brig and never would have seen him again. Because it's not a joke. And these writers and these showrunners and these producers think, oh, you can't do that. That's not, you need excitement. Nonsense. I know fighter pilots. They're much more interesting than these people. The guy who let me fly the F-18 simulator at full realism and a carrier trap on my 3rd try, by the way, 2 bolters and a carrier trap at full realism. Thank you very much. Much more interesting guy. His call sign was Amish, and he was I don't think he was actually Amish. He was very religious, very quiet, very intense, but controlled. That's much more interesting than this one-dimensional, hard swearing, hard driving, hard drinking, hard smoking, insubordinate, oh, Maverick, if you weren't the best fighter pilot in the fleet, I'd have your wings, kind of just stupid. It's stupid. And it's lazy. And everywhere I look, I see this kind of lazy stupidity. I saw this episode in season 1 where Starbuck has to fly a Cylon Raider off of the planet because she's been shot down and she's out of ammunition. She's out of oxygen, so she climbs inside a Cylon Raider, and it's filled with meat. Why? Why? The Cylons are machines. Why is this thing filled with meat? If you want to have a meat-based alien, that's really cool. I've given a lot of thought to what a non-mechanical alien, a biologically, technologically advanced alien that uses biotechnology, that's fantastic. But why? This thing is filled with meat? Why? Okay, it's filled with meat. I'm going to crawl inside. You're going to crawl inside? Is there room for you to crawl? Is there room for a baby to crawl inside of me right now? A 2-year-old infant crawl inside me and manipulate my controls? No. She's going to crawl inside this thing. She finds an oxygen tube. Okay. She's got a hole this big in the hull that she put there with her Viper. Shot a hole this big in it, and she takes a raincoat and pushes it up against the hole. And then she goes and flies in space with it. Now, I understand. I understand Cylons are organic machines. The human Cylons are organic machines. The Cylon warriors are not organic at all. Those guys are just metal. Why would you put this meat in a spaceship? Anyway, put the meat aside. She does all this stuff. She gets inside this thing, and then by squeezing on various tubes and nerve endings, she is not only able to control the ship, but she's able to outfight the second best pilot in the entire colonial fleet in a vehicle she's never been in before, with controls that don't work for human beings, that are essentially just neural connections. She's able to outfight the second best pilot in the fleet in order to get back up there and be saved. And it's just lazy, and I don't believe a word of it. I don't believe it. The story about her getting shot down and being rescued is great. The story about, Adama sticking around, all that conflict is terrific. But this was just nonsense. It's childish. It's just childish. And it's dumbing things down. And the more we dumb it down, the more they tell people to dumb it down. And it's silly. There was any number of ways you could have gotten her off of that planet in a Cylon Raider that would have made sense. But this was just lazy and stupid. And somebody says, should we tell Bill it's just TV? It's not. See, this is the point. This is the point I'm trying to make there, Party Rebel. There is good TV and there's bad TV. And when it becomes bad TV, it becomes bad TV because people do lazy, stupid things. The writers and the directors do lazy and stupid things. And you may not realize it, but you do. And this is the entire point I'm trying to make. So I'm going to all this sound and fury signifying something, because when you sweat the details, it looks real, and when you don't, it doesn't. That's why Game of Thrones seems absurd to me, and Lord of the Rings doesn't. It's not the budget. If you put Richard Taylor on Game of Thrones would look believable. And when you do these lazy things, you take people out of it. It's not trivial at all. I'll give you a great example. I think I might have talked about this once before. I know a little bit about subwarfare as a civilian. I've done a lot of sims with subwarfare. I've done a lot of. I know what a Mark 48 ad-cap swim-out torpedo is. I know what swim-out torpedo means. I know what it means to have a torpedo that swims out under its own propeller power of a launch tube, rather than having it ejected by compressed air, because the launch transient that comes from ejecting a torpedo with compressed air makes a lot of noise and tells other submarines where you are. So I say all that only to say this. I know something about, don't be ashamed to Tea Party Rebel. It's totally okay. I'm trying to make a point. It's not an obvious point at all. It's not obvious at all. So I know enough about submarines to know what's believable and what's not. Now, I'm the first person to admit that 99.99% of the rest of the population doesn't know enough about submarines to know what's believable and what's not. So here's the point I'm about to make. I watched Crimson Tide in a movie theater, and when they started to do a simulation for a missile launch, and they started using the terminology, I didn't know all of that terminology, knew a little bit of it, but spin up tubes 1 through 24, condition 1 throughout the ship. They used a fair amount of that very effectively in Battlestar Galactica. That's the part of Battlestar Galactica I thought worked best, was the communications in the CIC. When they would say things like set condition 1 throughout the ship, it had the ring of truth to it. Now, nobody knows what it's going to actually be like on a real vehicle hundreds of years from now, or a completely different universe, but set condition 1 throughout the ship sounds good. It sounds believable to me. It sounds better than battle stations, and it sounds better than, get those, if I find those flyboys down there, No, launch, the part about Battlestar Galactica that worked for me was they just came out and stole, and there's no shame in this whatsoever. They stole naval aviation terminology, moved it directly into Battlestar Galactica, and whenever they did that, it worked beautifully. What's a cap? We got to have a cap. We don't. The fleet cap is down. We can't take the cap. If we lose the cap, we'll put the cap down here on a search party. Well, we won't have a cap. What's cap? Well, every now and then, every 8th episode, they might say it's Combat Air Patrol, but it didn't matter because everybody knew what it was. Apollo is the CAG. He's the Commander Air Group. Okay, it sounds believable. And in Crimson Tide, you would hear these guys talking, and you'd say, "Man, I feel like I'm on a nuclear submarine. I feel like I am on a boomer." And then little things. Now, I'm perfectly willing to admit that I have a level of perception on this, not caused by anything miraculous about me. I'm just interested in this stuff, both in movies and in the military. But when in Crimson Tide, they go to get the authentication thing. They do the drill, which is brilliant, because when you do the drill, you know what's supposed to happen downstream, right, when you get to the actual crisis. So they do the drill, and they get the little plastic code decoder thing. And they pull it out of the safe. And it's a very, 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 very little thing. But as they walk through the CIC to get it to the captain, they're holding it like this. They're holding it aloft. They've got it up. And I thought, why are they holding it like that? And then I realized they're holding it like that because they want to show everybody else in the room that they haven't swapped these things out. That this is all about provenance of the signal. It's all about ownership and chain of command. Is it called the cookie? That's good to know. But they're holding this in a place where everybody can see it. They're not keeping it down low. They don't put it in their pocket, because if they put one in their pocket, they could pull another one out of their pocket. And so they're holding it up. Now, I didn't know anything about that. I had no idea at all that that's what they did. But the instant I saw that, I said, man, that is got to be how it's done. It had the ring of truth to it. And that meant that is harder. It's harder to do that than it is to have the guy just come out and say, here it is, Captain. Pull it out of his pocket. Here it is. What do I mean by it's harder? Well, you had to have a researcher or what's the word I'm looking for? Consultant. Turns out that the consultant on Crimson Tide was a former skipper of the USS Alabama. How about that? It showed. So you have to have the people who know what's really going on. But more importantly, you have to have a writer and a director who are committed to getting the mechanics, the picture frame correct. Because then when you put the drama inside the picture frame, the drama will feel real. And if you are not lazy, and if you are actually willing to do the greater work, and it's much harder, then you don't have to worry about losing people downstream because you've gotten it right. Yeah, the technical advisor, thank Rich. You do the work in the beginning. It's kind of like pre-flighting an airplane. You do the work in the beginning so you don't have to worry later. And you build this world that's believable, and then you say things like, well, I want him to say this. Yeah, well, he would never say that. Now, the second raters, third raters, fourth, fifth, and 83rd raters that occupy this business that I'm in, which is Hollywood writers, will say, well, I want him to scream and yell, or I want to show that she's an independent fighter. I want to show that she's angry. So they just say, they do this, and the technical advisor says, well, that would never happen. And the guy says, well, it's just TV. We're going to do it anyway. Okay. And then you get things like pushing a raincoat into a hole this big and flying through space. Most people say, well, that didn't bother most people. I agree that it probably didn't bother most people. But I also agree that if you had taken the time to have her fix that hole correctly, it would have added to the believability of the scene, and it would have raised the stakes. It would have raised the drama. It would have made you think, okay, we got a real character in a real situation with a real problem here. And this is, I can't stress this often enough. I see this all the time. Now, some of these things are so egregious, they're just hilarious. I saw a movie once where somebody said, somebody's in a jet, and he says, Roger, Viper 2, you are clear to land runway 72. And I thought, quite a runway. First of all, nobody says 72. They would have said 72, but the great joke for those of us who are pilots and aviators is that runways are numbered according to their magnetic heading. When you are landing on runway 09, or runway 9er, it doesn't put the 0. If you're landing on a runway and it's got a 9 on the runway, that means you're flying more or less 90 degrees. When you land on runway 16 left, you are landing on a runway that is 2 runways in parallel, and the left one is 16 left, and 16 left means you are flying more or less a heading of 160 degrees. So unless you can fly a heading of 720 degrees, and since the compass only goes to 360 degrees, you can't land on a runway 72 because there is no runway 72. The highest runway number you'll ever see ever in the real world is runway 36. That is a runway that points pretty much due north. Magnetic variation, and things are drifting, blah, 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 but you get the idea. Right? So that's just rank stupidity. It's not like clearing somebody to land on runway 72 is just you sitting in your basement someplace writing a story about something you don't know anything about. Now, beyond that is a level of realism where you actually have to go to the trouble to figure out how to do it. And here's the thing. In Aurora, I have the same problems that everybody else does. I have a problem just like any other writer, and that is this. I have to create a sense of drama, and I have to create a sense of conflict. I have to put somebody's life in danger, and I have to put their life in danger so that people can go and rescue them. And I have to have those people go and rescue them and pay a price, and that's adventure and action, and that has to be in the movie. Has to be in the movie. So what caused me months was a very simple issue. And it was, I had a failure that I liked. I had a great failure. Had a failure that was interesting and dramatic and was built into the design of the ship, and it was great. But my problem was, and still remains to some degree, what would have been the logical response to the failure? You can't have a failure that is so obvious that the people who built the vessel would not have had a failure mode response for. That's what I'm trying to say. So you have to have a failure that is unexpected, and you've got to give the people who built this vehicle enough sense and enough engineering sense and enough common sense so that the obvious answers are off the board. It's a very difficult thing to do when you really get down to it. It's a very difficult thing to do because I would come up with a failure and I think, okay, then they would do this, but then but if they did that, then what you would this common sense thing, this would be to savor this way. Yeah, that's right. That does make sense. There's no way it would. Yeah. What about the? Yeah, no. And then you can't start building this weird sort of thing that's so bizarre and Now most serious accidents are not just one failure; they're a string of failures, and one piece of equipment goes wrong, and then somebody responds the wrong way, and then something else happens, and really any one of these break the chain, and you don't have an accident. You have to have all these things happen. But I want to get. I'm going to move on, but you get the point, right? You have to do that. Hey, somebody, way to go there, Water Snake. A great example of something that's not lazy at all. This is a prime example of what I'm trying to talk about. Was in 2001: A Space Odyssey. They take precautions. This is a perfect example. It's because of Arthur C. Clarke, who cared. He wasn't lazy. He cared. So, 2001: Space Odyssey, perfect example. What happens? They're convinced that the computer that runs the ship, that controls their lives, that could kill them all in their sleep, could kill everybody. This computer is the nervous system of the ship. Is error prone. They don't know he's going crazy yet, but he's making a mistake. He can't make mistakes. So they decide, well, we may have to disconnect him. So what do? They go into the pod. They have a cover story about losing the radio. So they turn off all the radio things and they say, Hal, can you hear me? How can you hear me? They start shouting, Hal, can you hear me? No answer. They're pretty convinced that Hal can't hear them over the radio. They're also convinced that the pod is acoustically sealed enough so that Hal can't hear them through microphones. So they start talking. But Hal looks through the window and can read their lips. That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And then Hal, having read their lips, decides to kill them all because he knows it's just a matter of time before they come and kill Hal, disconnect Hal, make him unconscious, same as killing him. So Hal kills Frank Poole on an EVA. Dave Bowman, in a panic, Hal counted on this. It's brilliant, really. In a panic, Hal counted on Dave going out to rescue him, gets in the pod, flies out there. While Dave's out there in the pod recovering Frank's body, Hal kills the three guys that are in Poole, Kaminsky, and Hunter, kills the three astronauts that are in hibernation. And then Dave Bowman comes back, and he demands to be let in, and Hal won't let him in. Now you've got actual drama. You've got, in fact, one of the most dramatic moments in cinematic history. You've got this guy carrying the body like the Pieta. He's carrying the body of his dead astronaut friend. He's trying to reason with and argue with and order the computer to open the doors to let him in because he doesn't have a helmet. Now, that's interesting drama. So what happened? What did you do? Did Clarke have Bowman ram the thing? What he did was he said, well, all right. That means he's going to have to go through a vacuum. And so he turned the pod around and he had a mechanical door with a mechanical opening thing in case of emergency, an emergency entrance. I bought that. That makes sense to me. Opened it up, turned the thing around, pulled the explosive bolts and blew himself in there. And it looked painful. In fact, Keir Delay, I think, got really badly hurt on that shot where he got banged around in there. It was believable. It wasn't lazy at all. He exhausted all of the logical choices until you were left only with this tremendously dramatic moment where Bowman realizes he's going to be in vacuum for 20 seconds. He takes a deep breath, which apparently is not the thing to do. Apparently the thing to do is just keep your mouth open and let that air come out, because otherwise your lungs will explode. Or get an air embolism like in scuba diving. But anyway, you get the point, right? He did it. He did it right. And so I believed it. And the audience believed it. And this is my great criticism of movies, television, and everything else, is this kind of laziness on the part of writers. And it's something I take very seriously and very personally because I'm a writer. All right, moving on. Let's see here. That's an interesting question. I'm going to get through the first 7 of the 40. Sorry. Chris of 8 wants to know, well, it may not be entirely light, but what are your thoughts on extraterrestrial intelligence? Do aliens exist? Have they popped by for a visit? If they exist and we haven't run into them, is it just due to the vastness of space and or the rarity of life? Do you think there's more like a prime directive situation and they're supposed to leave less advanced planets alone? That is a profoundly great question. It's actually 5 questions. So I'll just kind of take them as they come. What are my thoughts on extraterrestrial intelligence? In a universe with 100 billion or 200 billion stars in a galaxy and 200 billion galaxies, the odds are spectacularly in favor of there being other intelligences. Now, when I was a teenager working in the Miami Planetarium in 1973, and from then on until the late mid-90s, I thought, not only are they likely, they're certain, and there's going to be a lot of them. And the second we get those radio telescopes looking out there, and we're going to find them, and we're going to find a lot of them. And then, due to the incredible advances in computer technology, we were able to not look at the sky through a little cocktail straw, but we were actually able to get looking at large buckets of the sky. What I mean by buckets is you're talking about a large area of the sky, meaning a lot of stars, but the much bigger issue is you have to monitor every single frequency. You have to monitor the entire, essentially really get down to it, you have to monitor the entire electromagnetic spectrum. You can't do all of that. But you can't just you don't know what frequency to tune into when you're listening for interstellar communications. Frequencies are virtually unlimited, and they can be very precise, and if you're not right on that frequency, you don't hear a signal. Now, as it turns out, there are a couple of natural frequencies that occur. Hydrogen has a certain frequency that makes it likely to transmit on. But look, here's the point. We started with the SETI, Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, and then they had that SETI screensaver, which I used for years, which basically was a brilliant idea. It was dispersed computing. So basically what they said was, if you want to help look for intelligent life signals, come to our website, download the screensaver. The screensaver basically did this. It took your computer, went to their server, pulled a data packet out. Your computer, in your own free time, at nighttime or while the machine was sleeping, or if you're out getting a sandwich or whatever, the screensaver would start chewing on that data packet and look for the signal, and then it would send that information back to the server. Now, the server would push it out to several, maybe hundreds of different people, the same data packet. And so all of these things are looking, and if all the results came back the same and came back negative, then we'll let that go. If one comes back fluky, then we'll take a look at that fluky packet. Now, the problem is they didn't find anything. They haven't found anything yet. And we've been out there doing this for a while now. And I couldn't really come to grips with why it seems like as we get much more advanced with our ability to find planets. First of all, when I started working at the Miami Planetarium in 1973, there was some very, very doubtful evidence that there was one possible planet around Barnard's star. They found a little bit of a wobble, and there was a possibility of one planet around Barnard's star, which is the second closest star system. It's a red dwarf. It's about 6 light years away, as I recall. And we thought, man, there might be another planet out there. Now we're finding hundreds a year, hundreds. And as we get more and more sophisticated with our instrumentation, and more instrumentation is coming, we're finding more and more. The ones we're finding are smaller. That makes sense. It's easier to detect a massive planet than it is a less massive planet. And so what we're finding is that planets are commonplace. And that great surprise to us is that already we're finding that things that we thought were impossible are happening. The standard view of our solar system was that our solar system consists of 4 rocky planets called the terrestrial planets, Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. And then there's a gap where a planet should have formed called the asteroid belt, which is not a giant boulder-filled thing of rocks. You fly through the asteroid belt for the rest of time and be lucky if you see an asteroid, or be lucky if you could detect the movement of one with the naked eye. And then outside of the terrestrial planets, you have the gas giant planets. You have Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. And then beyond that, you had Pluto, which was kind of a fluke and has been demoted. You know, Kuiper belt objects and planetesimals and all this other stuff. But the fundamental understanding about the solar system was that as the solar system formed out of gas, the sun finally reached enough mass to reach critical gravitational level where it was enough gravitation at the center of this cloud to produce fusion. The sun basically turns on and ignites. Pressure from the sunlight, the solar wind and radiation pressure, pushes the clouds of gas out into the outer solar system. That leaves the rocky core planets like Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, the terrestrial planets, in close. And as the pressure of the sunlight gets lesser as you get further away, the light elements, the hydrogen and helium, can basically form into planets like Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. So what we find is gas giants that are many times the size of Jupiter inside the orbit of Mercury. That's unexpected. We can't explain. I don't know how to explain that. We find these hot giants that are very, very close to their primaries, very close, orbits 2 days, 3 days sometimes. Very hot gas giant planets. It goes against theory. So I'm getting to your question here, Chris. it turns out that planets are far more numerous and far more varied than I thought they would be. That's good news. And yet we don't see any signal out there at all. And then I saw something, and I highly recommend this if you are in this mind space about extraterrestrial intelligence. I can't recommend this highly enough. This was one of the things I've seen, one of the documentaries I've seen that fundamentally changed my thinking about things. It was one of those milestone breakthroughs for me that changed my view about everything. And I think it was on Discovery, and it's called, If the Earth Had No Moon. Because anybody who knows anything about astronomy knows that the Earth-Moon system is actually a double planet. The only other bodies in our solar system that have anything like the relationship between the primary and the satellite. Usually the primary is enormous. Jupiter's primary is enormous, and even the big satellites around Jupiter are infinitesimal compared to the mass of Jupiter. Mars has a couple of asteroids for moons, very, very insignificant moons compared to the primary. But the Earth and the Moon is a double planet. And so is Pluto and Charon, by the way. But it's a double planet. And this documentary called If We Had No Moon shows that the moon does a couple of things that I had never, ever, ever had any grasp of whatsoever. The first thing that the moon does is it apparently stops axial inversion. When you have a spinning top, the top is spinning on a table and spinning very, very quickly, faster than the eye can see, but the axis of the top does this. It's called precession. And apparently, planets will eventually just wobble over, and then they'll slowly, I'm talking over hundreds of thousands, not millions of years. If a planet wobbles on its side, the seasons go completely to hell, which means that life can still exist in forms of lichens and mosses and stuff hiding, under rocks, and life can tolerate a great deal of extremes, but you're certainly not going to have higher organisms if you've got, a 6-month summer followed by a 6-month winter or worse. So the moon helps stabilize the Earth's climate in that regard. But the other thing that the moon does is, I didn't really believe it until I saw it. There was a little flash thing I saw on the web somewhere. But basically what it was the Earth with the Earth's correct gravitational field, the moon with its correct gravitational field, the moon moving around the Earth, and then you just tried to flink asteroids into the system and see if you could hit the Earth. And even if you try to hit the Earth, it's amazing. It's utterly, absolutely amazing what the moon does in terms of deflecting or taking asteroid impacts. You would think that it wouldn't be significant. And by the way, this is another kind of a bug of mine. People think that the Earth is this big and that the moon is maybe that big, and that maybe they're this far apart, or maybe they're that far apart. But at this scale, the moon's in three doors down. I mean, the moon is quite a good distance away. But the moon has taken so many hits that were meant for us. You just look at it through a telescope. The first time you get a telescope, look at the moon, or binoculars even. It's really remarkable. You need to see it with your own eyes. I know everybody's seen pictures of the moon. You really need to see the moon with your own eyes to see those craters and to realize that most of those were going to hit us. And so what the moon also does is it protects the Earth. It's a shield. And it protects the Earth from the kind of catastrophic impacts that basically reset the clock. Because a catastrophic impact, an asteroid impact like the ones that probably took out the dinosaurs, there's been several of those, 4 or 5 at least, throughout the Earth's history. And what it does is it preferentially knocks out the upper level animals, the bigger animals, the more evolved animals. And so very likely, without the moon, we would have had far more of these and would have had several since mammals crawled out from beneath the toes of dinosaurs, which means we never would have gotten there. It's Earth's wingman. That's what it said, Matt Dudridge, sorry. It's the wingman, and it's taken all these hits. So now, the reason I bring up the moon is this. If the whole theory is that in order to have intelligent life, you have to have enough time for life to evolve to a level of not only intelligence but technological innovation and technological society, then it's not a question of how many planets are there. It's a question of how many planets are there out there with a shield like this. Because if there is not a shield like our moon, which is a fluke, it's a freak, then your planet gets reset all the time. So that makes the Earth-Moon system, the double planet that we've lived on and that we've become technologically advanced on, it makes the Earth-Moon system far, 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 far rarer than the already extremely rare idea of a planet that exists within a star's habitable zone. So what I think the case is I think there's a lot of planets out there, lots. I think life is scattered throughout the universe. I think life is everywhere. I think intelligent life is much, much, much rarer than we thought. And there's an even more profound idea behind this. And that is simply this. If there is a universe where intelligent life is everywhere, where technologically advanced societies are able to communicate with each other and so on, it does make sense that somebody's got to be first. And I don't remember who came up with the quote. It might have been Carl Sagan or somebody, and I'm probably mangling it anyway. But either the universe is filled with intelligent life, which is awe-inspiring, or it's not, which is awe-inspiring. I don't know. I think there's probably... I would be surprised if we didn't find life in the solar system. I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't find some... We may still find some form of life on Mars. I think Europa has got a good shot. I'd be surprised if we didn't find something like that, maybe on Titan, which has got a pretty solid atmosphere. But even if we don't, I think it's out there. I think it's everywhere. But I don't think intelligent life is anything like as common as I originally thought it would be when I was a teenager. Let's just finish the question here, and then we'll do one more call tonight, I guess. Have they popped by for a visit? If they've popped by for a visit in prehistoric times or whatever, I have no way of knowing the answer to that question, yes or no. But the question about whether UFOs are intelligent life from other solar systems, I think the likelihood of that is 1 in a million. I don't believe that. I don't believe in the UFO theory. I don't believe that they're flying saucers from another planet. I don't believe it. I've done a lot of research and a lot of analysis of these things because, like Carl Sagan said, who's also done a lot of research and analysis and also doesn't believe in them, there's nothing I would like better than to have these people be right. But it's always some blurry photograph from a distance. It's never proof. And then, I've been around people who have seen lights in the sky that they swore were flying saucers, but they weren't. They were the bellies of geese or satellites. I've seen people react. I've been there. I've been there when people started hyperventilating because they saw a V-shaped collection of ovals flying over Miami. And I was excited too. I thought they were flying saucers. And then they flew right overhead, and I realized that they're the white bellies of geese that are reflecting the lights from the city up, back down, and that the dark necks and the wings are very hard to see, but if you really looked hard for them, you could see them. So anyway, so I don't believe in the UFO thing, but I do believe that there is life out there, a lot of life. I think there is probably intelligent life out there. I think it's very, very rare. I think it's the nearest one is hundreds, if not thousands of light years away. And it gives us some room to grow if we can just develop the willpower to write some checks, because it's not like we don't have the technical knowledge or the know-how. We're losing it. It's the money. Isaac Timmons wants to know if I've ever done a barrel roll. I don't know that I have. I've done loops. I don't believe I've done a barrel roll. Most of the flying I've done is primary training was in gliders. A glider's a loopable aircraft, but a barrel roll can be done in a glider, but a glider has the lowest roll rate of any airplane I've ever flown. I've never done a barrel roll. I've always wanted to go take aerobatic training. I think I'd be good at it. I'm looking forward to doing it, just never really come up. And I've never done an unintentional barrel roll either. But they sure do look like a lot of fun. And a good barrel roll, the difference between a barrel roll and a straight roll is a barrel roll is actually kind of you're kind of on the, you're actually kind of on the inside of a cylinder. That's why it's like being on the inside of a barrel. And a good barrel roll is always a positive G thing. You can pour scotch or liquid. I think I've seen Hoover, the greatest pilots ever. I think he'll do a barrel roll where he's pouring a liquid the whole time. He's flying the airplane and he's pouring a liquid. So there's always, even though you're going outside, you're always on positive G, and he's just pouring alcohol as he does his barrel roll. Hoover's an amazing pilot. He did all this stuff in this giant twin engine thing. It was tough. Am I instrument rated? I am actually instrument rated, Dave. 720. We'll do another couple. Who is your ideological, political, and economic sources? I don't know if I can answer that question. I think I'm going to skip that. Sorry, Louis Philippe. I've dealt with my sources before. It's a 3-hour answer, and I'm afraid I just didn't have a chance to do that. Let's see. Am I familiar with thorium and LFTR reactors? I'm familiar with the Mark Saint in a theoretical way. It's one of the things I actually have chalked off to know more about. For those of you who are interested in these kind of things, there's a great deal of opposition to nuclear power. But nuclear power plants, the ones that are online now, were built in the 60s or 70s and designed really in the 50s and 60s. These things are 50 years old in terms of design. And there are much, much more advanced reactor designs now that cannot go critical. Now, I don't know if thorium's one of them, but I know that there are some reactors that just basically don't reach those kind of temperatures. So if forget about mechanical failure, you have complete and total mechanical failure. You don't get a meltdown. You don't get a containment breach because they're not quite as hot. The thorium reactors, the thing that I do know about them is that they scale a little better on the low end, which is good. They're reliable. They're safe. I think they're sealed. I know there are some. It's a plot device in Aurora, not a plot device. It's a Easter egg in Aurora, where they basically go out and buy they're living in California 15 years from now trying to fly this mission, and there are these rolling blackouts, and they can't have rolling blackouts. They can't be trying to communicate with the vessel that's halfway across the solar system and just have all the screens go dark all the time. Rolling blackouts happen in California. And so these guys are already in a world of trouble. So basically what they do is they decide that they need a swimming pool out back, and they middle of the night they bring a backhoe in there and dig this big old hole. But they dig it a little deeper than they need to, and underneath the actual swimming pool they put a little self-contained 20 megawatt nuclear reactor with a 20-year lifespan. It's completely sealed. It doesn't require really maintenance or refueling, and they put it in the ground, and then they build the swimming pool on top of it, and then they and the rest of their kids jump in there because you either believe in this technology or you don't. And things like pebble bed reactors and all of these advanced designs are see this, when you really get right down to it, guys, this is the kind of stuff, this is the kind of talk that breaks my heart. It really is the kind of talk that just breaks my heart, because we have all of the answers at our fingertips. We have more natural gas in this country. Our energy reserves expand every day. Think about that. All our lives we were told we're running out of fossil fuels, we're running out of oil, running out of fossil fuels, running out of gas, running out of everything. We got to conserve. Every day that goes by, the amount of energy that we have at our disposal grows through technology and through human inventiveness. Fracking is a perfect example. And so we don't have to live like this. We don't have to eat our algae cakes. We don't have to be these people. Look, anybody who appreciates life on its highest level appreciates the value of simplicity and the value of efficiency. These are spiritual goals, not just engineering goals. Waste is something that should be abhorred by any thinking person. But with that said, we can irrigate the deserts. We can do all of these things. We can live like humans. But we let these people tell us that it's wrong. They live like kings. Everybody can live like a king. We have the energy resources, we have the means, the technology, so that every single American can live like a king, and people around the world are starting more and more to live better and better and better. But we don't do it because there is a suicide wish, there's a death wish that Western culture has. There's the group of people that have taken over political control of this country that hate not only conservatives, but hate themselves, hate Western civilization, hate humanity, hate the entire idea of people, and have been saying for 40 years that the greatest catastrophe that could happen would be the development of virtually limitless, clean, cheap energy, because that means we don't get to kill ourselves. And I'm glad somebody mentioned Hyman Rickover there, Rich, in the comments section. Mentioned Hyman Rickover. He's an amazing guy, because every time you hear people talk about nuclear power and the dangers of nuclear power, and this is a big theme in Aurora, because the captain of the Aurora he's a former sub-skipper. And so Hyman Rickover is the admiral who basically got behind the nuclear. He's the father of the nuclear navy. He was the guy who basically demanded that the Nautilus be built and pushed it through. One of these world-changing individuals. Like many world-changing individuals, my understanding, it wasn't a particularly great guy to be with personally, but he was a world-changing individual. And so when people talk about the dangers of nuclear power, and they think about these big power plants and living, man, we live 2 miles away from a giant nuclear power plant. There are, I bet it's certainly tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of Americans by this point, have spent years of their lives sleeping on nuclear reactors in submarines. There are people, thousands, certainly thousands, very likely almost certainly tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of Americans have spent years of their lives in bunks and barracks that are built on top of nuclear reactors. They are in a pressurized metal tube that is hundreds of feet underneath the surface of the ocean, traveling at 30 knots. And we've been doing this for 70 years now. 60 anyway. And not one of them, to my knowledge, in the U.S. Navy has ever suffered any adverse side effects. This is the difference between us and the Russians, by the way. And by the way, when we get into this nuclear power thing and people talk about, about catastrophes and nuclear power, they always come back to Chernobyl, and rightfully so, because Chernobyl was a freaking disaster. But this is the difference between us and the Russians. The Russians are a very deep people. The Russians have a tremendous old soul. They're very big into literature. They're very big into music and classical ballet, and they can do excellent science. But there is something fundamentally wrong with that culture, something internal. It's got nothing to do with us. There's something wrong with them because they have an attitude about human life that is different than ours. And they basically, look, the Soviets, I'm not talking about the Russians, I'm talking about the Soviets now. The Soviets saw American technological innovation explosion that happened after World War II, right up and through the 60s, and they mimicked it. They aped it. And they basically stole a fair amount. And forget about the technical details. Just the fact that we did it means that it could be done. So they figured out that they tried to do it. If you look at any of a lot of the Soviet aircraft that came throughout the 60s and 50s and 60s and 70s, they're carbon copies of U.S. hardware. The space shuttle example's perfect example. Buran looks virtually, you have to have a good eye to know the difference between Buran and the American space shuttle. But put all that aside for a second. They take chances with people that we would never take. And so we have to pay the price for their mistakes. For example, the Nautilus, SSN 57? No, it's not 57. 570? I forget what the number is. USS Nautilus was built. It was the first nuclear submarine, traveled around the world under nuclear power, and now sits in a place of honor. I guess it's in Groton, I'm not sure, but I think it's in the Northeast, and it's a museum, and you can visit it, and it's beautiful, it's maintained, it's painted, and people take good care of it. The first Russian nuclear submarine, which was rushed in order to match the Americans, in order to get the propaganda so that they could control the world, so they could show the rest of the socialists that the socialists were just as good as we are. Their submarines, their early submarines, killed entire crews, just radiated entire crews, and they called them the Widowmaker. K-19, was it? That Sean Connery movie that wasn't really very good. But they're disasters, and they kill their people, and they don't care because the crew of that submarine is worth less to them than the PR campaign of having a nuclear submarine just like the West. That's the difference between us. Thank you, 571. Thank you, Greg. I knew you'd know that. So our submarines work. Their submarines don't. Our submarines can be run essentially forever with essentially zero contamination problems. By the way, we're not immortal. We're not perfect. We lost, somebody pointed out in the comments section, we lost Thresher and we lost Scorpion. But these were non-nuclear accidents. And apparently the containments are still down there. So we do things right because we have to do them right because we're the good guys. And we can do them right because we care about our people. We would rather have submarines that our guys can sail safely. And we don't have to prove anything to the rest of the world. We don't have this inferiority complex that the Soviets had for their entire existence. Right? So our submarines are not radiation traps and death traps, and our nuclear reactors are the same way. Somebody pointed out the 3 Mile Island meltdown only caused one person a heart attack, and that might have been Edward Teller who said this, or somebody said only one person was injured in the 79 3 Mile Island release of radiation, and that was me. I had a heart attack, something like that. But nobody was killed in 3 Mile Island. A lot of people were killed in Chernobyl. But Chernobyl is so Chernobyl to an educated population. And this is the fault of our leaders. Chernobyl is such a catastrophe. It makes the case for why we should have nuclear power in a way, because here's an example. For instance, this is an analogy that I'll crack out someday, maybe during the virtual presidency when we talk about nuclear power, if I get a tough question on Chernobyl. Think about this. Let's say we had a technology to heat something up, and let's say we call that technology fire. And let's say that fire is able to provide all kinds of benefits. It can cook our food, keep our houses warm, keep us warm, stop us from freezing to death. But if we're not careful, fire will burn us all. We'll die. You touch fire and you get fire on you, fire will kill you, and fire will burn your house down and kill everybody in the house too. So let's just agree that fire has its pluses and minuses, and that fire has many positive advantages and many negative advantages. Now, let's look at what we do to protect ourselves from fire in a house. In a house, we build something called a chimney and a fireplace. And what it is it's a containment for the fire. We don't build fires in the living room, and we don't build fires in the bedroom, and we don't build fires on top of beds. We build fires in the very specially constructed areas which are designed to be fireproof. They're made out of stone, and we try to keep flammables away from them, and there's a screen that we can put the fuel in. We call the fuel wood. And if we do this carefully, we don't have a big problem with fires. As a matter of fact, if you think about it, folks, if you had a fireplace and you followed the common sense rules of fire safety by burning your wood in a fireplace and keeping the ash down and all that other stuff, and if you were willing to hire 2 or 3 people to sit in your living room all through the night and keep an eye on that fireplace, so the second that these mechanical systems failed and a little pop of a ember landed on your rug, there was somebody there 24/7 with a fire extinguisher and a little shovel to make sure that never happened, you could run fires in that house for the rest of the time and you would never have an accident. You just have a warm house, right? So what is Chernobyl? Chernobyl is a building that didn't have a fireplace. It's a reactor without a containment. It's not like the containment blew. They didn't have a containment in the Chernobyl reactor because they're only proles. They're Ukrainians. Who cares? Right? So who cares? It costs money to build a containment. We're not going to spend money on protecting these people. What could go wrong? So first thing about Chernobyl is Chernobyl was building a fire in your living room surrounded by wood and other things that burn, including children. And that's the first thing that Chernobyl was. And then the second thing that happened on Chernobyl was not only are we going to build a fire in the living room, but we're going to use illegal accelerants on it too. So they did a test. Chernobyl was running a test where they ran the reactor at areas where it was not supposed to be. And a Communist Party official said, this is my responsibility. He wanted to prove something to Moscow. He told all the engineers, all the firefighters who said, if you do this, it's going to catch fire and the building's going to burn down. He said, don't worry, I'm in charge. I'm the political person. You're just the technicians. So they violated all of their own operational guidelines. And then finally, they turned off all of the safety devices that would be designed to stop it. So they basically took all the fire extinguishers outside and just emptied them into the grass. And then they came back inside and they lit a fireplace on the floor of a building that didn't have a fireplace. They lit a fire on the floor, covered it with gasoline, and it burned the house down. And it killed the people that lived in the house. And they're utterly amazed. And now people are saying, we can't have fires anywhere because look what fire did to this house. That's it in a nutshell. You build a fire in a living room, you surround it by people and couches and burning things, you throw gasoline on the fire, and then you take the fire extinguishers outside and make sure that they're empty, and then when you come back and you realize that this house is on fire, you say, well, obviously, fire is not safe, we can't have fire anywhere. Better people freeze to death. That's pretty much it. It shouldn't be this hard to explain. I mean, really, if you said that to the American people, I think most American people would say, okay. What you ultimately have to do, and we're done for the night here, but what you really ultimately have to do in the end is you have to do this. You have to say, listen, folks, if you want to be warm, it's either going to be fire or oil or this or that. It's going to be one of those 4 things or whatever. It really comes down to nuclear, coal, oil, and now natural gas. So 4 now in this country. People talk about solar. Well, There's no solar power generated at night, and there's no solar power generated on cloudy days. Most of the country is cloudy most of the time, so you have to have a backup power plant that uses conventional fuels. And likewise with wind, it's not windy all the time, so you have to be able to power that too, which means backup generators, which means less efficient, smaller scaled stuff. So really, you can put all of that stuff aside. It's nice to do because it's essentially free if you want to pay the upfront cost. But yeah, let's not be stupid. Let's not waste anything. But nevertheless, coal, oil, gas, or nuclear. And somebody needs to say to the American people, we need one of these four things to heat your home, and every one of them comes with some disadvantages. So which advantages do you want? Now, if you say, we don't want any of the disadvantages, then we say, well, then the answer is you have to freeze in the dark. Because that is it. But we live in a society now where we expect perfection, and perfection is not attainable. And this is ultimately the source of the gun control argument and everything else. You have to make a choice. You have to make a choice and take a little risk. Not a big one, a little one, to get a giant reward. But we're now at the point in a society where we are so spoiled that we are unwilling to assume any risk. We want all the reward and no risk, and that's just not going to happen. And I've seen a couple people ask me to talk about Fukushima. Fukushima was a catastrophe, and Fukushima was a disaster. Fukushima was a reactor that was old, and it was built to take the worst case scenario. The worst case predictable scenario in terms of a seismic shock the reactor was built for. It ended up taking worse than the worst case scenario. So that reactor did what it was supposed to do. And the reactor obviously had some big problems. But what we find about this reactor, looking back on it is, and we learn things, is that if they had not tried to save the reactor, this wouldn't have been a problem. And so far, my understanding is that nobody's been killed by Fukushima. In fact, when they were talking about evacuating people because there were detectable levels of radiation, a number of people were saying, you could evacuate the people from the area 20 kilometers outside of Fukushima reactor directly. You could evacuate them to Los Angeles. And if you put them on a jet plane and fly them to Los Angeles, they're going to take more of a radiation dose on that jet plane ride than they would by staying in the area. We get irradiated whenever we travel by jet airplanes. You fly from Los Angeles to New York, and you are spending 5 hours above virtually all of the atmospheric protection. Now, the ozone layer is still above you, obviously, and that helps quite a lot. But your radiation dose in an airplane is much higher than it is on the ground. That's why flight attendants and pilots are a unique risk for cancer. So, again, it's just this stupid kind of this is kind of idea that there's no risk to anything. But back to Fukushima, one of the things we learned was that these things needed pumps, and the pumps were submerged by the traditional, the gas-powered pumps that would have saved all of this problem from happening were taken out because these conventional generators, were destroyed not by the earthquake but by the tsunami. Now, I suppose we would be able to realize that, well, whatever we're going to do, we're going to protect ourselves against both of these things. We can't have these generators in low-lying areas, but it goes even bigger than that, I mean, no, this was a catastrophe. Look, here's the case, right? No one was killed in Fukushima, but let's say that they had been. Japan went from being bombed out rubble and people living in rice huts to being, for most of the time since World War II, just recently eclipsed by China, to being the second biggest economy in the world. And Japan is what Japan is. All of the cars, all of the everything is a result of nuclear power. It's a nuclear country. So you have to ask yourself, if you had 60 years of prosperity and 60 years of people not dying from diphtheria and 60 years of people living to be in their 80s instead of dying in their 30s because they're trying to burn cow patties, you have to ask yourself, what point would that reactor technology, would that nuclear nation, how many lives would you be willing to pay for that? And they haven't paid any. And this is coming back again to what we have to do. We have to understand that nothing is free. We're so spoiled that we expect it to be free. You could make the case that 1,000 people killed by the Fukushima accident is a small price to pay for the millions and millions and millions of lives that were led fully and long lives and prosperity and wealth, and people who were literally chasing oxen prior to World War II. What price would you pay for that? We count the hits and we never count the misses. And this is a childishness. This is adolescence. It's silliness. And I'm tired of it. We got to get on to the brass tacks. But the point is that Fukushima did every single thing wrong. The reactor took a seismic blow worse than the worst case scenario. The tsunami came and took out all of the backup plans. They could have avoided a lot of the problems by basically sacrificing the reactors, flooding the reactors, and saying, hey, you know what? The reactors are gone. Let's keep the damage down to a minimum. But they tried to save the reactors. That was a mistake. We made all the mistakes. And again, what happened? Nothing happened. It's a catastrophe. It's a disaster. It scared a lot of people because a lot of people let them get scared. There are detectable amounts of radiation in Los Angeles. We can detect the signal from the Voyager probe, which is outside of the solar system now. It's transmitting about as much energy as a Christmas tree light, and we're able to detect that. We can detect anything. And I think, I have to say, we'll call it a night here. I have to say one thing. Right when Fukushima was happening, I thought, my God, we had the opportunity for the single greatest PR image that we ever could have had. If I'd been the president of the United States, I would have, the second I heard about this, President Obama and Joint Chiefs, whoever, basically said, we're going to evacuate our Navy from Fukushima because we're concerned about our people. Oh, I'm concerned about our people too. If this had been a genuine, actual, honest-to-God, serious radiation threat, wouldn't that have been an extremely useful, what's the word I'm looking for? Simulation, drill is the word I was looking for. Aren't all of our Navy vessels supposed to be able to survive in an extremely highly radioactive environment, the result of nuclear weapons used against them? This was trace radiation. No one ever knew. Everybody knew that the stuff offshore was trace radiation. Wouldn't that have been an excellent training exercise to button these ships up and see how effective we are at this? But this is not the point I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is this. Can you imagine what it would have been like? Because if I'd been the president of the United States, I would have dispatched the aircraft carriers we had available. I would have, everything that I could have diverted and gotten away with, I would have done it. Can you imagine the publicity, the PR angle of the United States of America sending nuclear-powered aircraft carriers to help the people of Japan? Is that not beautiful on 7 levels? We fought, the only people we've ever fought in this, there are only 2 people in the world who know how to run aircraft carriers. That's the Japanese and the United States. The United States Navy and the Japanese Navy, the only people who've been able to figure out how to do this. We fought carrier wars in the Pacific and just tremendous carnage. And now we're going to send aircraft carriers back to help the people of Japan who've been our allies for 60 years. We dropped 2 nuclear weapons on the Japanese people to stop that war, and it was the right thing to do. But can you imagine nuclear power aircraft carriers from America coming to help prevent radiation sickness and damage to the people of Japan? Who could put a price on it? You can't write this kind of stuff. I would have had the United States Navy sail out there. I would have sent every carrier we had. I would have put them offshore. I would have gotten that nuclear. I would have got nuclear power on. I would have docked them. I would have gotten nuclear power somewhere in there. I would have had. I'll tell you one thing I would have had is this. I know for an absolute certain fact that the United States of America can put generators anywhere in the world anytime we want to. We can have generators anywhere on the planet in 3 hours up and running without question. So the second that this would have happened, I would have said, ladies and gentlemen of Japan, speaking as the President of the United States, you're allies for 60 years now and you're good friends for 60 years after a terrible war. How can we help you? Our aircraft carriers are on the way. We are. You don't have to use them if you don't want to, but I'm dispatching them now in case you decide to. We are going to put emergency generators throughout your entire country. We're going to be there for you. You've been our allies when it's been tough to be our allies. You're our friends now, and there's no better way that we can show it. We're going to send the United States Navy that the last time we deployed to your shores was in mortal combat with your brave and honorable fighters, and this time we're going to come and we're going to do what we can to save your people. My God. I just don't know. I don't know why this seems so hard. It just seems so absolutely obvious to me. It seems so nakedly doable and noble and positive. We got a lot of work to do in 2013, my friends. And so another Stratosphere Lounge comes to the close at 1 hour 52 minutes. And Thanks for joining us. 2012 is a little rough. We're going to do better in 2013. We got a lot of work to do, and I think the world going forward is a world where we basically try to ignore these people as much as possible. I'm tired of trying to argue with them. I'm tired of trying to convince them, and I'm certainly tired of spending my energy and time trying to persuade them of things that are obvious to me. I think the thing to do is for us to just basically just, okay, well, we think that this, that's fine. Have a nice day. Go away. We got other things to do. I don't want to argue with you anymore. I'm tired of it. We're just going to go on and do it. So we're gonna have to start creating these parallel structures. We're gonna have to start putting some pieces on the board, and that's going to take some cash. So anyway, thanks for joining me. It's been a fun evening. It's been a fun year. And it's got to be fun. I mean, you know, this shouldn't have to be oral surgery. So we'll see you next year. Thanks for joining us, and have a great evening. Okay, bye-bye.